I grew up in Arlington, Texas. At some point early on, this was in elementary school, my parents experienced some form of church hurt. And so we ended up leaving the church, and we would only go on Christmas and Easter. And so when I got to high school, I met Amber. Amber would invite me to go to different things. She would invite me to go to church, and I would go because I thought that's what I had to do. That's what I was supposed to do. We got married, and after we graduated from college, and I went to school for radio, television, and film, and that's the industry and field that I went into. So I worked in television for a very long time. I worked with fiber optics, which was kind of a thing that isn't something that a lot of people knew about. So I became very popular very quick. And I was one of a few people in the country that knew what they were doing at that time. And so I would go to all these different events. And so I traveled all the time. I missed the first 5 wedding anniversaries that we had because I was at the US Open. And I did major events. I went to Super Bowls, Oscars. My work became my identity. I was on call 365 days a year, 24/7. Even when I was at home and I was at a soccer game or I was with my family, I might be physically present, but I wasn't mentally present. I have 3 wonderful boys. Grayson is my oldest, Hudson is the middle, and Levi is the youngest. As we continued to grow, our family got bigger, we needed more room. And so we moved to Haslett. We moved to Sendero Ranch, which is right across the street from the Haslett campus. I was on a part of the Facebook HOA page, that whole thing. And there was a guy that was selling a TV. So on the neighborhood Sendero page, Chuck Machika listed this HD TV. Chuck lived in Sendero. I went over to his house. As we were wrapping that up, he said, "Hey man, I just have a question for you before you go. Where do you go to church?" I said, "Well, man, we don't really." And he said, "Well, hey man, I'm a pastor over at this church called Fellowship of the Parks." And I was like, "Yeah, I know where it is." And so I think actually a few Sundays went by before we actually physically got up and went. I remember walking in and just so many people were greeting us. And then I remember seeing this short, bald guy that I had met 2 weeks earlier, and Chuck made eye contact with me. He got this big grin on his face, and this is what hit me. From across the room, he yelled, "Justin, man, it is so good to see you." And he came over to me, he shook my hand, he introduced himself to my family. And I won't ever forget this, it's vividly burned in my mind. When we left that, I know exactly where I was standing, and my oldest son, Grayson, who was, I don't know, maybe 10 at the time, he turned to me and he said, "Dad, I have a question. Why don't we come to church every Sunday?" Looking back on that moment, I feel like that was like the moment that was like, okay, we're supposed to do something. I called Chuck and I said, "Hey man, like, I've never done this before. I don't know what this means, but I feel like we're supposed to get connected." And so we started serving, and I never felt equipped. I never felt qualified. We served in marriage ministry. Amber and I would get up and teach launch. We served in kids ministry. Anytime that they needed somebody to dress up, I think they recognized that I was just an idiot. And so they were like, do you want to dress up? So I would dress up, and we did VBSs, and Amber and I led VBS. We taught together in classrooms. I was taking off work to go do church things. Again, I just kept saying yes to what I felt God was telling me to do. And so at one point, I got into a conversation with God, and I was like, "Look, man, like, if you want me to do something, I just need you to open doors and make it very clear." And that was a Saturday night, and on Monday morning, Chuck called me and said, "Hey man, can you meet with us? We've got this Justin campus kicking off, and I'd like you to consider going on staff." I still struggle with feeling qualified, but I said yes to that. And in 2018, I left my job that I worked at for 21 years and went into this crazy thing called ministry. My life has been completely transformed. My kids have all accepted Jesus. My kids have all been baptized, and there's nothing special about me. I just keep saying yes. I heard somebody say one time that all I have to do is introduce people to Jesus, and then he does the rest. And so I've taken that, and I've taken everything that I tried to do at our campus, and I've just tried to create the same experience, the same moments that I had in Haslett where I felt welcome. Fellowship of the Parks is in my DNA, and it's changed the trajectory of my life, and I've been able to see my kids' lives be changed. My marriage is better than it's ever been. I love this church. I love where I am, and I'm honored that I get to do this. Like I said, I'm nobody. I just try to say yes, and I hope that other people experience the same thing that I experienced. And I know that if he can use me, man, he can use anybody else. And so I'm just grateful. I'm just so incredibly grateful.